Speed Channel welcomes you to the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix International Raceway, where yesterday in the NASCAR Busch Series qualified for Saturday's Bashas Supermarkets 200, and today we will show you their final practice session. Cars in the garage at the ready, and shortly we'll have them on track for what is mistakenly called happy hour in both the Busch and the Nextel Cup Series. Hi everybody, Mike Joy, Larry McReynolds, and Jeff Hammond with you once again as we come out to this unique 1 mile racetrack where a lot of these drivers have never been, at least not in the heat of competition. So Larry, what are we looking for in this final practice session?
Well, trust me, this 1 hour session will seem like it lasts about 15 minutes because you're trying to accomplish so many things. Yeah, you're still trying to run those fast laps just like they did yesterday in qualifying, but the biggest thing is, can we run a fast lap on lap 30, lap 40? This is a 200 lap race tomorrow. These guys have got to work on fuel mileage, they got to work on what gear they want to put in that car, but the biggest thing, what always wins the race at Phoenix, getting that car to drive good on old tires for long runs. That's the challenge.
Jeff, the two championship contenders, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., neither of them have ever raced here prior to this week. So what are they looking at?
Well, what they're looking at right now is the fact that even though they qualified quite well with Kyle Busch being on the pole, you're looking for somebody who's been around this racetrack and can give you some insight on what to be looking for in this morning's practice. I mean, the fact that we're going to be starting early this morning, racetrack is going to be extremely cool compared to where they're going to be racing on tomorrow during the heat of the day. So you're going to have to go to a veteran and say, hey, tell me what to expect, what not to get my car. You know, when Larry talks about the setup, you want to make sure you get a car here that works well on long runs. The tires, by a lot of people's estimations, maybe a little bit hard for the racetrack right now, so get in the car where it's comfortable for you and not overreacting or over-engineering for these two guys is going to be real important.
We've got a lot of stories to cover in this hour, including the return of Rusty Wallace to the Busch Series. But the biggest story is the Busch Series Championship. Let's go down to the garage. Matt Yoakum.
Mike, championship point leader Martin Truex Jr. has been very impressive this season in acclimating himself to new racetracks, tracks where he's never raced at before. 3 of his 6 wins this season have come at racetracks that he saw for the first time that weekend. Now, Martin, did you get any advice from Dale Earnhardt Jr.? You told me no, so how did you acclimate yourself to this place?
Well, I just came here and, tried to get our car working good. We weren't real good when unloaded, and just going to work real hard this morning and try to get our car driving good for the race.
So what are you going to work on during this final practice session today, Martin?
Just try to get some speed in our car. We were pretty good yesterday at the end of practice, just not real fast, so try to get a little bit more speed in it, get it driving good, and hopefully have a good race tomorrow.
He will roll off tomorrow from the 9th position to Bob Dillner.
Well, Matt, 8 spots ahead of Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch's points rival here in the Busch Series, and he's not too shabby at acclimating himself to new tracks as well, because he's on the pole in his first attempt here at the Phoenix International Raceway. But Kyle, is this car as good in race trim as it was in qualifying trim yesterday?
Well, it wasn't the first practice. We were able to be quickest in practice in race trim and qualifying trim, so we're pretty happy with the number 5 Lowe's Gladiator Garage Works Chevrolet this weekend. Hopefully we can just make a couple more fine adjustments to it and make it a little bit better. I learned a whole lot here in the AutoZone Elite Series race last night, and we're going to take that to our advantage and work with it today.
What are you going to be working on in this practice session?
Basically, you just got to make sure that your car turns good. On old tires, the front air pressures build up because of the brake heat. Then you just got to make sure that it'll turn after that.
Well, guys, he mentioned the Southwest Series. He finished 7th in that race here at the Phoenix International Raceway yesterday.
Well, I'm curious, neither driver talked a lot about mentoring, and maybe we can get into that later in this hour, who they have been getting advice from. Here's a look at the top 10 starters. Kyle Busch, rookie pole sitter.
And here's the math on Martin Truex Jr. If he can average a 10th place finish in these final 3 races, and remember, in 31 starts this year, he has 23 top 10s. If he can average that top 10, he can win this championship regardless of what Kyle Busch does.
Final practice coming up. Coming up, Bud Pole qualifying for the NASCAR Nextel Cup Series. 4 p.m. Eastern Time, live from Phoenix. You're seeing this practice session tape delayed same day here in Phoenix right now. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:15, which accounts for perhaps some of the emptiness of the grandstands, but a very busy pit road and a lot of activity.
And guys, we're sitting there watching Martin Truex, our point leader, in kind of an unusual color. We haven't seen him run this car, I don't believe, all year long. This is the Long John Silver color on the car, number 8. kind of used to seeing them either in a red or a little bit more of a distinguishing color. But as always, Martin, one of the first cars out on the racetrack. The car's looking pretty good right now, Larry.
Yeah, big announcement for Martin Truex Jr. at Atlanta last week. He will run the full Busch schedule again next year, along with 7 Nextel Cup races. But 2006, 2007, full-time Nextel Cup for Martin Truex Jr.
And I think what's significant, too, Larry, is recently we've seen a lot of drivers come to Busch and come to Cup from open wheel racing, particularly USAC, Silver Crown, sprint cars, and midgets. Martin Truex Jr. came out of NASCAR's Busch North Series, and the next DEI development driver, Ryan Moore, is also coming out of that series. So it's interesting that teams are also looking in a lot of different places for emerging talent. Matt?
And Martin Truex, using this paint scheme he used back in August at IRP, told me moments before he climbed in, he just wants to get a good, solid practice hour in this afternoon, because yesterday had 2 flat tires, he made some contact with the wall. He just wants to get a good, solid feel for this car today.
Thanks, Matt. This racetrack is unique. It's a 1-mile oval, but oval doesn't really describe it. It's not really D-shaped like, say, Michigan or some of the tracks that have a curved front or back straightaway. It's really different. There's not really a letter to describe what this place looks like from the air.
You know, when you start trying to think, I was trying to figure out, a racetrack that these guys could relate to, whether it would be the Milwaukee Mile or someplace else that they run on that equals the length of this racetrack. But it is a very unique racetrack. I would almost liken it to an old racetrack we used to run on back home in North Carolina, North Wilkesboro. It's not exactly symmetrical because both corners are different in their own respect. When you come into turn 1, the way you run off of turn 2 and down the back straightaway out close to the wall, you've got to get the car really rolling. And a lot of teams this morning were talking about having to put enough gear in it to make the car run up off the turn 2 to get down that back straightaway because of the number of RPM you lose through that corner. So getting the right gear selection is going to be real important for tomorrow.
It's a little like Pocono in shape, except instead of the tunnel turn, you just have a slight dogleg in the middle of a straightaway, and turn 1 is the small end, and turns 3 and 4 are really the big end, the big wide radius end here.
Very different ends, but let me tell you what else is very unique about this racetrack, and I experienced this a year ago spotting for Wally Dallenbach Jr. in the Busch race. The spotters are on top of the grandstand, but in the middle of 1 and 2, and you talk about a challenge because when they come down that front stretch, they're coming at you. It's hard to tell if you're clear a car or not. When they're going up the back stretch, they're going away from you, and 3 and 4 is so far away you almost need binoculars to see it. So the only place you can really spot effectively is right in the middle of 1 and 2. Quite a challenge for these guys.
But the big advantage to being down there, Larry, is you can see the whole racetrack. You won't miss anything. Some of the teams also put spotters up on the mountainside in turns 3 and 4, up on the hillside in and amongst the fans. To get a look at this place.
You almost have to, but yeah, you definitely can see the whole racetrack from up there as far as any type of trouble.
Guys, we're looking right now at Kyle Busch, who's second in the points right now. He's on the pole for tomorrow's race, but boy, he really spanked him when it come time for qualifying, didn't he, Larry?
Yes, he did, by 0.3 of a second. They came out here and tested. He was the fastest in practice, but something they did, we talk about people trying to get track time, and remember we've already talked about this will be his first Busch start here, is he ran the Tour race yesterday, finished 7th in that race. Totally different race car, but at least got some track time to know what this track did over the course of that race. And Bob, I think you can add to that.
That's true. You guys mentioned who has he learned from to run this racetrack so well, and he told me, hey, my brother Kurt, of course, has told me a lot of things about this racetrack in the past few weeks, but the other day I sat down with former Busch Series champion David Green, who's best finished his 5th year, but David has run this track in every single Busch Series race out here, and he said, I learned a lot just from that brief 5 or 10 minute conversation with David Green. And of course yesterday you guys mentioned that Southwest Tour car, very different, but Kyle did tell me, hey, it helped me get used to the line around this racetrack.
And his crew chief, Lance McGrew, and a lot of members of that race team won a Busch race here in 1999 with Jeff Gordon driving that car. The only race Jeff Gordon has ever won at Phoenix.
I think Kyle points out what I've long felt. There's no substitute for seat time. Put them in a go-kart around here, and it's going to be helpful.
Well, how many times have you seen drivers go to a veteran and say, hey, show me the line, show me the marks I should be looking at going around the racetrack? And what do? They get in a street car, and they get an opportunity to at least get a feel and start looking at it. Because, again, when you're out there at speed, everything's happening so quick. You need to get that comfort level so you can do it easy, and recognition is the key as far as being good around a racetrack.
You see Kyle Busch right here in the 5-core car go off into turn 3. You mentioned, Mike, this is the tighter end of the racetrack. Getting that car to turn in the middle of the corner right there, run around the bottom as you saw the 5-car do, and then be able to pick that throttle up and not push or get loose off turn 4, and you carry so much speed down into turn 1, car under braking will tend to get loose, want to wash up the racetrack if you overdrive the entrance of the corner, as he did. You can see how much ground he lost right there, but when you put that throttle down off either end, you want to be able to stay in it all the way down those straightaways.
And Larry, he's chasing a pretty good veteran to be watching around here, Joe Nemechek, and see how he kind of matches up against him.
Kevin Harvick, quickest in practice so far. As the championship battle continues, here's a look at how close they are. Truex 6 wins to Kyle's 5. Martin's 23 top 10s to Kyle's 20. If average finish is similar, they've been all but welded together so far this season. The NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series lives on speed, and their race, presented by General Motors, is today, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live from Phoenix.
And you know who's going to be in that race today? In fact, he qualified 6th. He'll be back in that series next year, Ron Hornaday Jr.
Returning to a track on which he has won numerous times in Winston West, Southwest Tour, and other series. Kevin Harvick is quickest, Jamie McMurray is 2nd, and Kenny Wallace just jumped to 3rd on the practice board. Let's go down to the quickest car in this hour so far. Here's Matt.
Kevin Harvick very pleased with the way this 21 car is reacting early in this final practice session. In fact, he and crew chief Ricky Vires were debating on what slight adjustments to make, so they decided to make a spring change in the rear of this car. They've already made a right rear spring change. They've got a few other adjustments they're talking about making on the next run.
Kevin has so much success at this racetrack. In fact, he's finished 2nd in 2 of the last 4 Busch races, and even though he won't be racing today, he's won the last 2 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races here.
A little bit of a problem here for Rusty Wallace.
The car going off down in turn 1 and 2, starting to smoke.
Didn't look like he put any fluid down, or those 2 cars behind him would have had some trouble.
It looked like he must have caught it pretty quick, but Rusty had to bring it to the garage area. We got trouble right there off of turn 4. The 1 car just went around.
Whoa, and he almost got collected, but made it to pit road before Hermie Sadler got up and into him.
That's Casey Mears.
Yeah, I just happened to catch him out of the corner of my eye. It looked like the car got loose on him and went around, and he kept it off the wall. Doing a good job of driving, but he almost, like you said, Mike, as he rolled away to try to get back down on pit road, he just about drove in the path of Hermie Sadler.
Casey qualified back in the 15th position. It'll be interesting to see what that problem is with Rusty Wallace, because he qualified 14th. If he has to change that motor, he'll have to go to the rear.
Did he get booted, or did he cut down a tire?
It
or did
almost,
something
it
lock
sounded
up?
like he was certainly getting ready to come in onto pit road.
Booted.
I believe he got hit and maybe didn't. You know, what you should do is, and maybe he did or didn't, is give that hand signal to the cars behind you in practice, and you need to do it down the backstretch that, hey, I'm going on to pit road. And it sounded like he definitely was coming to pit road. The car behind him did not acknowledge that and just picked that throttle up, got into the back of him.
So hopefully no big damage done. We'll check when we come back to Phoenix.
There's Wally.
Wednesday at 8 p.m. we go behind the headlights for a look at presidential limousines. Wonder what George W. will order up for his new ride for his second term.
Be time to order one now.
I would say. Bob Dillner.
Let's find out exactly what happened to Casey Mears here in this yellow #1 car. Casey's inside the cockpit, the crew going underneath the hood of this thing. But Casey, big question is, what happened out there?
I don't know. I mean, it's easy to make mistakes in practice, but I was waving him off down the back stretch, and maybe my hand can't get up high enough. He must not known I was coming in the pits. But I just wanted to try to get in the pits hot, and he must not have seen me waving him off. So, yeah, just a little bit of a mistake. Not that bad. At least we didn't hit anything, so that's good.
That is true. This car a little bit loose, guys, and the guy that hit him, his Ganassi teammate, Jamie McMurray.
And in Jamie's defense, and obviously Casey documented that he was waving his hand, but these cars have so much stuff in them. I mean, I could see where if a guy has his hand up there, that a guy may not see it with everything else that's in the cockpits of these race cars.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, Larry, a lot of drivers have gone, instead of waving right out the back glass, they're trying to get their hand even out the side, the left-hand side of the car, and start waving a guy off. But it's very difficult. As he said, he was trying to come in hot, so you're trying to do both, keep a hand on the wheel, and I'm sure it can get away from you. They were very lucky that it didn't really have any more damage than what you see.
Now, if we can move around right to the back of the car and shoot through the back window, you see just how, I don't want to say cluttered, but okay,
very busy
cluttered.
in there. Very busy.
It's kind of cluttered. It might be hard to see a hand waving if you're driving the car behind.
And also factor one other thing in, too. Even though it doesn't seem like it, there's enough glare as you go off in that turn down there from the sun reflecting off these back windows that you might not have been able to see his hand no matter what.
There you see the glare. Jeff, I think you've hit it right there. No.
No,
Jamie,
they hit
Jamie
him.
hit it. Yeah.
That's right.
Jeff just made note of it.
Rusty's back on track, Matt. What was the problem?
Well, I spoke with the team, Mike, and they said that a brake duct started to come loose, started rubbing against the tire and rubbing up against the fender, and that was the problem.
And Matt, brake ducts are so important in this place. We already talked earlier about how much speed you carry off into these corners at the end of these straightaways, especially, we talked about it a while ago, at the end of this front stretch right here. You can see the car just nose down. That's from getting off the throttle and putting the brakes on hard. So cooling those brakes are so important. You'll see a lot of brake openings to pump air to cool these brakes. So something definitely you have to make sure it stays right.
All three Wallace brothers in this race tomorrow.
I know Rusty came out here and tested for 2 days with this Busch car. Of course, he made a start back at Michigan in August, finished 6th in the Busch car, and he was tickled to death with his test for 2 reasons. This car ran well, but he felt like he learned so much that they can take over and implement on the Nextel Cup car.
Let's check with Matt.
Well, Mike, next week they'll call it a Darlington stripe, but this week here at Phoenix, Kyle, what happened? We see you got a little bit of a scrape on the right side.
I just got a little bit outside the groove off of turn 2. I didn't think I was that far out or that close to the wall, but obviously we were. I don't even think if it did, it just put barely a little black mark on the fence, but it wasn't too bad for us. It's nothing, just like cosmetic stuff.
So what have you learned so far during this final practice session?
Well, the car's actually going pretty good. It's just the longer you run, the tires build up and you start slipping into the corners a little bit more. So I'm sure we can fix that with a little bit of tire pressure, but we're going to see if we can't work the chassis a little bit to help us out there so we can use the tires for more of an advantage later.
It was a nice little scrape, but it didn't leave a mark on the tires, just all the way down the right side sheet metal, Bob.
Over here in the Joe Nemechek pit, and Joe has actually been checking out some spark plugs that came out of his car after that last run. So, Joe, what are you doing? You a motor guy now, checking out the spark plugs?
Something happened there. I got a shake in the engine pretty bad. It looks like we broke something there. I'm not sure what. We're trying to find it. Tough break for the Cellular One Chevy guys. Qualified 10th. I think we've got a good car for the race. We're going to have to change the motor now, so we have to go to the back of the field, and that's always tough here. But we did a lot of race stuff yesterday, and the car was really good, so we're just trying to make sure today it was all the same.
Tough here for Joe Nemechek, but it'll make it interesting for us to watch him come from the back to the front tomorrow. Matt?
Bob, a lot of work here in the championship point leader Martin Truex's car. Now, earlier he said it was tight in the center and it was loose on late exit. They made a right rear spring change. Then he said it made the car too tight. He wanted to put the spring back in. Now he's back in again, and they're changing the shocks on the rear of this car. Earlier they changed the shocks in the front of Martin Truex's car, and also the 21 of Kevin Harvick is in. They're going to make a shock and spring package change on this car as well. He said it's too tight.
And I would say before this practice is over, especially before this race is over tomorrow, you will see a lot of these cars with stripes down that right side, because you just run out of racetrack over there on the exit of turn 2 on the backstretch.
Jamie McMurray is quickest. Kevin Harvick, Kenny Wallace, Greg Biffle, Kyle Busch. Here's the 00 of Tony Raines, the Haas Automation Chevy, and he is 14th in this practice session.
Of course, this is the car that Jason Leffler competed in most of the season, was sitting third in the driver points. And back at Kansas, they took him out of the car and have had different drivers in there. I think Boston Reed or Blake Fees has drove this car quite a bit over the last few weeks. This week, Tony Raines is driving the 00 car.
I was watching Tony Raines a few minutes ago. He was following the number 25 car, Mike McLaughlin, and watching McLaughlin in front of him. And boy, you talking about the track, I think, is starting to heat up. The cars are starting to get slipping more up off the corners. I'm watching them get, stay a little bit loose up off these corners, especially off of turn 4. And he almost got in the back of the 25 car.
Rusty Wallace talking it over as he makes his return to the Busch Series.
Talking right there that looked like a Barry Dotson.
New season for the Simpsons begins November 7th only on Fox. Doe is not what Mark Martin just said after he and Ron Hornaday battled for a couple of laps for track position, and contact was the result.
I mean, guys, to me, they were racing like it was the last lap of this race tomorrow. They went off there in turn 1, and watch this. Hello.
Both cars going for the same spot. Does not work going into turn 1.
But Larry, they've been doing that earlier. Ron Hornaday basically put a big slide job on Mark over off of turn 4, and it's almost like he made Mark mad. And I mean, they just went at it. Said, okay, you want to see how good you really are? I'll show you.
It's Ron Hornaday in the 2 car, coming down to the final races in this 2 car. He will not be in it next year. Clint Boyer will be in that car, and Mark Martin here in the 9. Pretty much several years ago rewrote the record books in the Busch Series and just making a few starts this year. And we had him on trackside a couple of weeks ago, and he said he's really enjoying running some of these Busch races. We talked about the track temperature in the early part of the session. This session is getting close to about halfway over, and already the track temperature has come up from the mid-60s to the mid-70s. Which is what these drivers need. They need this track to get real hot and slick before this practice is over, because that's what they'll have tomorrow during this race.
And the forecast for today, later today, 85 degrees here in Phoenix. So I don't think in this hour we're even going to approach the type of condition they'll have when they drop the green flag tomorrow.
And Jeff, you can just watch Mark Martin here in the Pennzoil, the 9 car. His car is really sliding around. I was watching it in 3 and 4 a while ago. Run right around the bottom in 1 and 2, but it's like it slid around in the middle of the corner, slid around, and he picked the throttle up in the back of the car.
And Larry, watching that car, especially when he had the shot coming right down the front straightaway, if you'll notice, he's got damage to the right front of that fender on that car already from getting together with Ron Hornaday. As we take a look at Casey Kane as he's coming back down on pit road. I don't know if that's going to affect Mark's car a lot, but normally you do not want to have damage on the right front fender. And I believe Bob Dillon's got some more information about Mark's car.
Well, that's right, Hollywood. I actually walked up and talked to the boys on the team. I said, hey, what happened there? Did Mark say anything? Well, in typical Mark fashion, he absolutely said nothing about the contact, but he was very concerned with maybe some damage on the right front of that car. But the spotters way up high up on the racetrack here said, we don't see any damage. You're good to go, Mark. But Mark is concerned inside that race car.
Mark is 7th fastest right now in this session.
And Bob might want to pass along to them that from our camera shots, what I think are a little bit more accurate right now, he does have some damage to that right front fender.
And you you run so fast at this 1 mile racetrack. The sensitivity of those front fenders, almost like at every racetrack we go to, can really affect the handling of that car. You don't want to start giving him a false reading. You see it right there, how much damage is on that right front fender. You don't want him to start getting a false reading about what that car is doing because of that.
Trying to hook those front tires up, and that downforce is so important.
You mentioned he's the second fastest Ford in this practice. His Roush teammate Greg Biffle in the Charter Communications Ford, which will start outside pole, is the quickest Ford, 4th overall. And then there's Wally. Wally is 24th in this session in his Ford. Let's see, he's run 16 laps.
Wally have his work cut out for him tomorrow when they drop the green flag. He qualified back in 24th position. There's a good shot in-car shot of Wally looking back at him, working that steering wheel. Wally a race here this weekend and then at Homestead Miami Speedway in 2 weeks in the final Busch race.
Watching Wally work his hands inside there, he's really letting the wheels, driving the car a lot with his right hand, letting it slide through his left hand, which is a little bit different than a lot of people. A lot of drivers will turn the wheel down in the corner and pull it in with their left hand more so than letting the wheel slide. Watch him go off in the corner. He kind of like lets the wheel see the left hand. He's letting it slide through and then grabbing it back and working with just one hand right now through the corners.
I wonder if being an ex-open wheeler and road racer kind of may account for that, where, like you say, Jeff, a lot of fellows who grew up on oval tracks in stock cars will be more, I guess, would you call it left-hand dominant?
I call it left-hand dominant, and you may have a very good point right there, Mike. Where he came from, the way he learned how to drive is just a little bit different than, let's say, for example, Bill Elliott. I've seen Bill drive with his left hand and put his right hand literally over on the roll bar and kind of steady himself around the racetrack. I mean, just different driving styles.
See that car right there behind him? That's the 14 car of David Stremme. He's 6th quickest in this practice. This is his 2nd start in this race car. Had a good run in Atlanta. He will be in this car full-time next year.
And the track's been shut down. They're going to do a little cleanup work and then reopen it for more practice for the NASCAR Busch Series. Jamie McMurray, Kevin Harvick, Kenny Wallace, Greg Biffle, and Kyle Busch are the fastest. Welcome back to final practice for the NASCAR Busch Series. For tomorrow's race, the Bashas Supermarket 200. Jamie McMurray, Kevin Harvick, Kenny Wallace, Greg Biffle, Kyle Busch still have the fastest practice times, followed by David Stremme, Mark Martin, Mike Bliss, Casey Kane, and Johnny Sauter.
Look at there, guys. We have lights in Phoenix, Arizona. Why do we have lights? Well, we hope we don't need them this weekend, but NASCAR on Fox will be here the last week of April with the Busch Series, the Nextel Cup Series on Saturday night under the lights in the desert. That'll be cool. And Matt Yoakum hopes we're staying at the Wigwam.
Yeah, it'll literally be cool, Larry, because when the sun drops below the horizon here, it's like turning off the heat switch. It gets cool here in a hurry. Jamie McMurray, quickest so far. He's run 17 laps in this session. That's kind of low. We have drivers with as many as 26, 27 laps on the board.
And this weekend will be Jamie McMurray's 100th Busch Series start. He debuted back in Memphis, October of 2000. 1 pole, 5 wins, 15 top 5s, and 32 top 10s in those 100 races.
Significantly, all those 5 wins came after he was named the substitute driver for injured Sterling Marlin in the Cup Series and posted his first Cup win. Then he came right back, started winning in the Busch Series.
Yes,
are you trying to say that confidence has a little bit of something about driving a race car?
Wow.
How about that?
But I tell you guys, this race car right here, this 41 car, this is the car that Reed Sorensen is going to drive on the full schedule next year. And Reed had a heck of a run in Atlanta last week, and Matt Kenseth made some comments during that race about Reed Sorensen's talent that definitely, I'm sure, made Reed Sorensen's confidence level even go higher. He said this guy has what it takes.
Here's another fellow who has what it takes. All season long, we've talked about the Lewis family racing team, owned by Ashton and driven by his son, Ashton Jr., and crew chief for most of the season by Ashton's brother, Charlie. and they've been unsponsored for most of the season. The team is shutting down at the end of this year, but there's good news for the Lewis brothers.
He's signed to a full-time ride for next year, and a pretty good full-time ride. He'll be on that number 25 car, the Marines car for Renzi Motorsports. You talk about confidence, though, Matt. They name him to drive that race car for next year. He comes out here to Phoenix and qualifies fourth.
And Larry Mack is a crew chief. You can see it in the eyes of a driver. When he has confidence, that's worth a couple extra tenths. And he's saying right now on the radio that the rear of the car is just breaking loose, especially when he tries to make that exit up off turn 4. They're talking about a rear bar change to try to help that. But a lot of guys listening to scanners down here in the garage area are concerned about the 41. In fact, Greg Biffle's back in. He was hitting the rev chip, but liked the way his car was turning in the center. They're all trying to keep apprised of the lap times that the 41's running. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the godfather of Fox Racing, Richie Zions, is working on that wigwam for you, Larry.
You know, something interesting. Look at those 4 black holes at the bottom of the front end of Ashton Lewis. We've been talking all during this practice session about cooling the brakes. I'm going to assume by what I see there that that's the brake duct openings going to cool the brakes. And what I like about their location, the front end of a race car is like a weather map. And the closer you come to the center and the lower you go, that's the higher pressure area that you have on that front end. So they have those ducts almost in the most highest pressure area of that front end that they can to get the most air flow through the brakes.
Now, how does that affect downforce and drag when you move those openings from the edge of the front valence to the center?
Mike, it's a good question you bring up. It helps it a lot because what it does, the center of the car allows the air to kind of like flow in through the center of the radiator, but the outside edges, if you're able to keep them relatively clean and keep the shape where you don't have holes there, it makes better downforce. So the front end likes that a lot more. If you can keep everything more centrally located, you'll take more advantage of not only reducing drag, but increasing the downforce.
I saw on one of the internet message boards the other day about how if Jimmy Spencer doesn't return to the sport, as he was released recently by the Morgan McClure team, maybe the Mr. Excitement handle ought to transfer over to this guy.
Robbie, what do you think? In that 55 car. Of course, Robbie running a limited schedule, had a great qualifying run yesterday. He's going to start 7th. We talked to him last night, Jeff, over at Harrah's, and pretty happy with this race car.
Very happy with his race car. But, Mike, after talking to him last night, Larry and I come to the conclusion, it's not only Mr. Excitement, but Mr. Endurance. He's going all over the world right now, racing different types of cars, down to the Baja. I mean, all the different places and different types of cars. I don't see how his body and his mind can keep up with it.
Just doing what he loves to do, Bob.
Exactly. Right now, 17th quick on the speed charts in this practice session, and that doesn't look too good considering he qualified 7th yesterday. So I ran over to that Fruit of the Loom car, and Robbie called me over to the car quickly, and he was all smiles. And I said, "Why you all smiles? You're 17th quick." He says, "Hey, I put on 30 lap old tires to start this practice session, and I have not changed just yet. We're trying something here." So, guys, questions for you up in the booth. What is he trying to do?
He's trying to make sure that car drives just as good on those 30 lap tires as it does on new tires, which it won't. But again, as we talked in the opening of the show, getting that car to stay consistent over the course of a long run, because these cars can probably run about 80 to 90 laps on a tank of fuel.
And realizing something else, new tires always feel good.
Yes, they do, to all race cars.
All race cars.
And you're going to spend a lot more of those 200 laps on worn tires than you're going to on new ones.
You exactly will. Remember, you only get 3 sets to change on the caution.
The youngest of the 3 racing brothers from St. Louis. They're all in this race, and Kenny is 3rd quickest in this practice. His brother Rusty had a little trouble early, then got back out. He's 24th. Mike Wallace 34th in this session.
Kenny's had a good weekend so far. As you mentioned, Mike, he's 3rd quickest in this practice session, qualified 8th. And remember, we talk about the championship battle. Kenny Wallace is in this battle like a lot of other teams, Ashton Lewis, David Stremme, to try to stay in the top 10, because even in the Busch Series, when the season starts, your goal is to win the championship. The second part of that goal, finish in the top 10 in points.
But watching that car here, he's got it right around the bottom of the racetrack where you want to have it, and the car's very smooth getting up off the corner. It looks really good right now.
The fellow who is bad fast in this session right now is Martin Truex. Who was it? Kevin Harvick tried staying with him going into the corner, couldn't get off the corner with Martin. Martin looks like he's beating everybody back to the throttle coming up and off the corner, and if that's the case, he's going to be tough to deal with tomorrow. Matt?
And the 23 team, Mike, is hoping that they're going to be tough to deal with tomorrow as well. Kenny hasn't won a NASCAR Busch race since the fall 2001 at Rockingham. Best finish here is fifth. He told Chris Rice that it seems to slide around a lot, but it does take a few laps to get going because of the setup. They made a shock changer, and they feel like that they're pretty good. Bob?
Well, Matt Kenseth likes his race car, but right now, like a lot of guys down here in the garage area, very tight in the middle of the corner and too much grip off. So right now they're changing the front shocks on this baby here right now. And this team has a brand new sponsor, Waste Management, for this race here at Phoenix. 14 races next year. Tomorrow they will also announce that they will be the full-time sponsor on Bill Lester's Craftsman Truck Series ride with Bill Davis Racing next year.
You know, I'll go back to Kenny Wallace and what Matt was talking about in their setup. The reason it takes these cars a little bit to get going is because in race trim, you know how much air pressure these tires are going to gain over the course of a long run. So you try to lower the air pressure down just as much as you possibly can, knowing how much it's going to expand with heat and over a long run. And a lot of times the car will feel very wormy and skate around until that air pressure builds up just a little bit in those tires. That is the challenge at Phoenix, Arizona, and you're going to hear it. You'll hear it all during the Busch race Saturday, the Cup race on Sunday, is getting the cars to turn in the middle, be able to put the throttle down, carry that speed off the corner without the front end shoving up against the wall or the back end getting loose.
J.J. Yaley right there in the Home Depot number 18. Now, guys, he's got a lot of laps around this racetrack in a various assortment of cars, I think, from champ cars, sprint cars, I mean,
midgets, Silver Crown cars.
Yeah, Silver Crown. He's got a little bit of experience in everything.
And this is a home game for JJ.
We can just get the thing to rotate the center without making it loose on entrance now. I think it'd be pretty decent.
He's from out here. His dad, Cactus Jack, noted sprint car and midget racer on the area tracks as well as the national circuits. When they run the Copper Classic here in January, they have a class for just about everything on wheels. I mean, you're apt to see it's a great celebration of racing with multiple divisions, everything from Silver Crown on down to mini stock some years. And JJ's had a chance to pretty much run them all.
And a second ago, we heard JJ call into the garage area and talking to his crew chief, letting him know what he needed to work on the car as far as that was concerned. And Larry, as you know, it's a fine line between making the car rotate in the middle of the corner. It's a give-take. He's already saying, I'm a little loose getting in. If we can tighten it up just a little bit and not hurt the rotation in the center, will be pretty good. Here's a guy that's been pretty good since he unloaded out here. That's Kyle Busch. He's going to be on the pole tomorrow, but watching his car around the racetrack, he's looking pretty solid. He's sixth right now as far as practice, but he's also looking really good in race trim.
And what that rotating means is basically when you reach the apex of the corner and the driver turns the steering wheel, the car responds and turns with it.
Here's Matt.
And Martin Truex has got out of his car. Kevin Bono Mannion has the 8 car up on scales as Bono and Gricci and Martin talking things over. They seem pretty pleased with the race car. As Slugger Labby also in here. Looks like they're going to maybe make some more adjustments to the 8 car as Bono's talking things over. We'll catch back up with Martin in just a minute. But they feel pretty confident about where they stand at this part of this final practice session.
And they're wanting to try to weigh their race car as they did before practice to make sure that the wheel weight stayed the same through all the changes that they made during this practice.
Let's go back to Matt.
Well, the debrief's over, Martin. How good is that car?
It's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. We're still working on it here. We started on some older tires than we probably should have. I guess they got a tire shortage again this week or something. So it's not bad. The lap times for the tires we're on are pretty decent, and we need to get it to drive a little bit better. But we'll throw some tires on here, see what it'll do in the long run.
Now you got to like the way things are starting to size up here. You go to Darlington next week where you finished 5th in the spring, and then you got Homestead where you nearly won last year.
Yeah, I think they'll both be good tracks for us, but we need to concentrate on this track right here and get a good finish tomorrow.
And this is the one unknown this weekend here at Phoenix. Never raced here before, Mike.
Yeah, and he didn't sound all that happy considering how well he was beating people up off the corner.
Yeah, I think he was just frustrated because he wanted to have something a little bit different. But the key thing is that he's focused on this race, one race at a time, guys, and that's how you win a championship, one race at a time.
Welcome back to Phoenix. When Martin Truex told Matt earlier he wasn't that happy with the car, here's why. Truex just ran his best lap of this session, but it's good enough for only 14th quickest.
Well, and I think the reason is most of those quick laps were ran when the racetrack opened, when the track temperature was very cool. I don't think you can run that fast of a lap like Jamie McMurray and Kevin Harvick did earlier in the session.
Ashton Lewis did. He's run 60 laps, the quickest of which was his 43rd lap, fairly late in the session. Lewis is third, but he is the only one in the top dozen that did not set his fastest lap in the first dozen laps he ran.
But Mike, a lot of times when you go out, a driver has to make his mind up what he's trying to accomplish. Now, Martin said that they'd like to make a long run, so he may be pacing himself, waiting for the tire pressure to come up and do something a little bit different. Whereas in Ashton Lewis's case, the tire pressure may be a little different. He may have been be a little bit more aggressive, and it's only a very small margin to see the difference between these two cars. When you watch guys go out on fresh tires, this is when you got to be very dependent upon your spotter, let you know how you rate a game. Because a lot of times you're as much as a half, 3/4 second faster than guys on older older tires. So you got to be careful you don't run in the back of somebody, get down in one of these corners, or pick your throttle up too quick, and a guy doesn't get back the throttle and run in the back of him. So new tires are great as far as trying to feel things out, but you got to be up on your toes.
And Larry, the big unknown is there's no way for us to know up here what this team is working on, and whether they're attempting each time they go out to run the fastest lap they can, or what their agenda is, or what the setup is.
I know as a crew chief, when we went to computer score, and the worst sheet they ever created in the world was a practice sheet for practice after qualifying, because the driver would run around saying, look, we're 30th quickest. And what you would have to do, a lot of these teams have a system, what they call a lap tracker system. And basically, it will spit out the data from every practice lap from every car. So after practice, you would go sit down, and maybe Martin Truex Jr. and Kevin Manuel will sit down and compare all of their laps to Kyle Busch's laps in the 5 car. And you can even see how many laps in a row that each car ran. And that's what you're looking at. It's not about that fast lap. And the point I'm going to make is Matt Kenseth right there is sitting back in 17th position. Guarantee you he will be better than a 17th place car tomorrow in that 17 car.
Paul Menard there catching Truex has the 12th quickest lap in this practice, but to put it in perspective, Menard's quickest lap was at 28:02, and right now he's lapping at 28:11, so he's pretty right close on to Jeff, the best that he's been all day.
Yeah, he just came out and got behind Martin Truex again, who's run a few laps. He's got fresher tires on, so again, the tires here are very important. The fresher the tires or newer tires are definitely going to make you quicker. And you see the red and black right now being displayed from up here at the flagman, signifying that this practice session is over. For a lot of these teams, they'll go back and do what Larry talked about. They'll be studying these timing sheets to make sure they get their car dialed in right for tomorrow.
It's time to run that Motor Coach 500 now. Let's go to the Motor Coach and let's talk about it a little bit. There
That's
they go.
where he's headed.
Back in Phoenix, final practice is over. And one of the guys that many are going to be chasing on Saturday afternoon is Greg Biffle, who turned in the 5th fastest time. Now, your crew chief, Brad Parrish, said if you can run those lap times all day tomorrow, that's going to be a good race car, can you?
I don't know. You know, we think we can come close to that. Those were 18-lap tires that we had from yesterday, because it seems like there's tire shortage out here. So we couldn't put another set on it, and we had a right rear that delaminated there on us. So 18-lap tires, we're running 28 flat, but 41 cars, about 2-3 tenths faster in the field right now. So we're not sure if anybody's going to be running with him, but hopefully I've got 2nd through 5th spot anchored down.
And he already has a win here at Phoenix back in 2001. 5 wins this season. He'll chase win number 6 tomorrow. To Bob Dillner.
Jamie McMurray fast no matter where he goes, not only on the track during that final practice session where he wound up first quick, but also here he came over to the Cup garage already to talk to his crew chief Donnie Wingo on the Cup side. But let's talk Busch right now. How was that car? Going to be good in the race?
Yeah, it's really good. We tested out here a few weeks ago, and really from the time we unloaded it testing, it was fast. And we're pretty much at the same setup that we had testing. Haven't changed a lot. So it's honestly, it's one of those cars that if you can not get in trouble and have good pit stops and not make any driver errors, it's a race-winning car.
And Jamie McMurray looking for win number 2 on the season.
Tomorrow, the Bashas Supermarkets 200. You'll see it on NBC, and here's how they line up.
Just remember, we talked to Joe Nemechek earlier. He's going to have to go to the rear of the field making that engine change. He's going to have some strategy to get to the front.
Point positions 1, 2, 3 up there in the top 10. Here's how the rest of the field sorts out. Rusty's return to the Busch Series. Mark Martin in there as well. A lot of bushwhackers in this field.
Yeah, we got 11 normal Nextel Cup drivers out here trying to take advantage of getting some seat time here in Phoenix. We don't normally get a chance to race here but once a year, so taking their turn behind the wheel.
See, Michael Waltz up there in row 19 has been struggling ever since they unloaded. They almost did not make the field because, remember, he was not eligible for a provisional because of his Nextel Cup status.
A big field with some of the bushwhackers and people trying to get their deals together for 2005. So a long list of folks that did not make the show.
Yeah, 58 cars came out here and attempted to qualify for this race. Extremely large car count for the race here in Phoenix.
All right, the race tomorrow.